Welcome to People. I'm your host, Micah Mater. Now, there's a new poll showing young adults, or millennials as they're called, are less religious, more liberal than older generations. Researchers with the Pew Research Center polled 1,800 millennials from ages 18 to 33. Now, they found 29% are not affiliated with any religion. Only 26% are married, 10% less compared to Generation Xers. And when it comes to politics, millennials describe themselves as independents, most likely leaning left, a little bit more liberal. Only about half describe themselves as patriotic, the lowest level in 4 generations. However, the study also says 72% of Americans say religion is losing its influence in politics. And half of those surveyed want religious groups to express their views on political and social issues. Republicans want churches to express their political views much more than Democrats. 41% of people say politicians don't talk about their religious faith enough. So what does this all mean? Well, Dr. Winfred Neely is a professor of pastoral studies. He's at Moody Bible Institute, and he's here with some insight. Thanks so much for sitting down and talking with us about religion, often something people don't like to talk about in politics. First of all, that Pew Research survey, you don't really agree with it, right?
Well, no, I think it doesn't zone in on the African American community, which may not be representative of the findings of the statistics. I would argue that the millennial presence among African American congregations is typically pretty much the same as my generation. It's about 24% of millennials are among African Americans are in a church.
So strong. You say 24% is strong.
It's pretty strong.
Okay.
Now, and I also, my church, for example, Progressive Baptist Church on the south side of Chicago, where we have a young pastor, very competent.
35 years old.
35 years old, well-trained, working on a PhD at one of our seminaries up north, is attracting a lot of people 18 to 29 years old, and they are deeply involved in the church and deeply committed Christians.
So, do they leave out a certain segment of the population in that research, you think? Or
leave out? That may be a little too strong, but I think it may have been an oversight. Now, there's another thing to keep in mind. I work at Moody Bible Institute as a professor. I spend the bulk of my time working with millennials.
Okay.
And we have about 1,500 students in the undergraduate school, and these are deeply committed Christians. So while there may be an exodus, it doesn't mean that there aren't millennials who are deeply committed to the practice of faith today.
Now, you told me something that attracts the millennials to the church is keeping up with the times,
right? For
lack of a better way of saying it.
That's correct.
Do you think some churches don't do that?
Yes, some churches don't do that. It's understandable. I can understand how that can happen. Church life is such a precious part of a person's life.
Is it because of the fellowship? Is it because of the deep-rooted feelings about God? Why is it?
I think it's all of that. I think fellowship, deep-rooted feelings about God, a sense of identity. This zone is where I actually feel, in some sense, humanized in a redemptive.
That's what I identify with.
In a redemptive sense. Now, with this, though, comes trappings, culture, certain ways of doing things.
Right.
And what happens, a church can be anchored to the rock and geared to other times, when in fact a congregation needs to be anchored to truth but geared to the present hour. And I think this is the thing that some of the millennials concerned about. Well, yes, I understand principles, but the concern is how do these principles relate
to me today? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about politics, because that's something they're saying that, you know, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state.
Right.
Then why are these folks in this survey saying they want to see more politicians talking about religion? They want to see more religion in politics.
No, I don't blame them. I think they want to see how their faith impacts every sphere of life and not just a little narrow slice of spirituality on Sunday morning.
That's interesting.
It's got to be comprehensive. It's got to be cosmic.
Okay. Well, you stick around with us because we're going to talk to a woman about who's an atheist.
Yes.
And how African Americans are turning to atheism.
Sure.
Okay. When we return, more on the state of religion, specifically in the African American community. Is there a cultural bias against non-believers? One woman says yes. We're going to hear from her coming up.